Fairview's coffee has mysteriously gone missing. Mayhem ensues when strange, coffee-craving zombies plague the city. Detective Mickey Potatoes, an overworked public servant, uncovers why ordinary citizens are losing their minds and how to stop the coffee apocalypse. But it involves the mafia. And when you're dealing with mafia crime families, nothing is ever easy. The mafia controls everything in the city, including the police, including him. If he breaks the mafia, they will break him. So, the city is without coffee. The city is burning before his very eyes, but he's powerless. Detective Potatoes has the power to stop the coffee apocalypse, but if he does, he could lose everything.
The Immortal Mask, a 1970s superhero crime noir adventure that follows a retired soldier who is given a covenant interview with a death row inmate. What he learns from the interview thrusts him into Atlanta's shadowy underworld. He'll have to utilize his military training to survive from being hunted for the information that could topple the most powerful ruling class in the city. This is not a pre-order or a crowdfunding campaign. Get your books now at thenunneley.com.
Madness Entertainment Group presents the Madness Comic Network with original programming and additional comic-related content.
25 seconds to curtain, folks.
Your favorite podcast is Critical Blast.
And good evening. I am your host, RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at criticalblast.com, and we have finally run out of advertisements. So we are starting the show up here. Yeah, I got a little bit of a different layout here, playing around with this StreamYard thing. But tonight we are going to be looking at a new book, currently available on Amazon as an ebook, soon to come out in something you can hold in your hands, like the way boobs should be held. I mean, books should be held. And you can tell from the title that, well, if you look at the title, you're probably got one thought going through your head right now.
It's purely sexual.
Let me assure you, this is a serious topic. No, really, it is a serious topic because there's a lot going on here that's just more than the, gosh, what happened to the sexy superheroines of yesteryear. And to get into that, let us now talk with the author, Mr. J. Ishiro Finney. Ishi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Didn't realize I'd get applause, but that's great.
Oh, everybody gets applause on this channel. It's cheap. Trust me, you get used to it. We have a hopping chat out here. You have brought a lot of people over to.
Oh, excellent.
It's the word boobs in the title, I'm sure.
Hey, if it gets them to pay attention, when I first started writing this book, I really struggled with the title because I didn't want anything too academic. And I don't know where it was. I was talking to my wife and she just said, why don't you just name it after the trope? Boobs of Steel. That'll get people's attention.
Yes, it does. And it's a very serious, very academic treatise on what's going on in the culture war, focused on, the way that women's bodies are, we're taking the heroic form, the form of beauty and saying, this heroic form is unrealistic. What's very realistic is something that doesn't look like a woman at all. Which, and then in a manner of life imitating art, we end up in a society where surgery is making that happen. So it's maybe I'm jumping the gun, maybe I'm leaping to conclusions. You're the guy who studied all this. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why this was an important book for you to write?
Well, actually, it started as just kind of a fun little writing guide that my wife and I were working on. Just full disclosure here, my lovely wife, Kat Rocha, is blessed with a, how would we say, an Alex Ross Power Girl figure. She's got H cups, and she and I were talking when we first moved into our new house, well, what if we did a writing guide so that, all these writers could stop making really horrible mistakes about boobs? And it was just kind of a fun little gag where we would basically answer all the questions people were afraid to ask. And she and I were doing it together. And as I started writing that book, something else kept coming out. And she kept saying, this isn't the topic. This isn't a writing guide. This isn't, this is a, how did she put it? She said, this is an article on something serious. And what it is the more I wrote about the subject, now keep in mind, I've been in the industry since 2007. I've worked for Archaea, which is now Boom. I've done work for DC Comics. And one thing that Kat and I had noticed while we had worked in the industry was around 2009, there was starting to be this shift where Hollywood came in and things were getting weirdly political and woke. And then by 2012, it was in full swing and a complete mess. But one thing we noticed is just the sheer level of hatred for basically busty characters, and that my wife, by proxy, got plenty of that abuse. And the usual excuse was over and over again: that's not realistic, that's harmful, that's bad, that'll hurt girls. And it's like, well, no, not really. And
I'm sorry to jump in like this, because I'm old enough now to remember when girls with a poor body image were told and counseled, you're good enough, you're a fine person, be happy in your body.
Yeah.
And somewhere we flipped the switch that says, you're not happy in your body, we can cut your body into pieces and throw off those things that you don't like.
Well, that's what I was shocked to find when I first started writing. You read the first chapter, Is This a Joke? Where I talked about my bizarre logic as a child of, well, when the Incredible Hulk on TV gets, when his powers come out, he grows all muscular. And when Wonder Woman uses her powers, she spins around and turns into this busty goddess. Well, those curves must be her lady muscles, 4-year-old logic.
Sure.
And that logic, I realized, works its way into our fiction and has been around forever. And that, in fact, the curves and breasts especially are an intricate part of the archetypes we use. There are a whole array of archetypes that symbolize the feminine and female power and female influence that require feminine curves. That Wonder Woman does not have the same effect. She's supposed to be, basically the embodiment of female power. Well, why wouldn't she look like a hyper feminine goddess then? Why wouldn't she have killer curves? She is all things that are feminine to the extreme. And making her look like a man, our subconscious reads that. When we see a woman who looks like a man, our subconscious sees them as, oh, that's just a failed man. That's a man. And so if a very masculine woman goes on the hero's journey, we don't see it as anything other than, okay, here's a woman who took the masculine path. She basically is a man. Whereas if you have one of these heroines who are curvy, is very overtly feminine, take the hero's journey, that is a woman taking the hero's journey. And it's because our brains work in symbols. It's the Jungian archetypes. And by robbing us of these characters and robbing us of these archetypes and basically getting rid of them, telling girls, oh, they're horrible, I started to realize as I was putting the pieces together, this has all been a part of an ongoing campaign since, well, I would say it was the 50s, but it really got started in the 70s to basically turn girls into boys. And it started with 70s feminism, and they were heavily influenced by the 40s and 50s postmodernists and communists. And basically, year after year, just, oh, Barbie can't be curvy. Barbie's got to have a flat chest. Barbie's been recreated like 3 different times, and every time she becomes more mannish. Girls are constantly being told, oh, well, your feminine body will get you raped. Are we as shocked that, 50 years after nonstop telling girls that being female is just a horrible thing, that girls would start resorting to cutting their tits off and trying to look like men? They're trying to become men because they've been convinced being feminine and being female is the worst thing in the world.
I wonder if this is sort of got kicked off when, there used to be the trope that if you were a curvy, feminine female portrayed in film, very seldom were you shooting the Terminator or hunting for treasure. You were usually hanging on the arm of some other guy, and you didn't have much of an IQ. And those things got conflated together. So where, they're like, hey, if you look like this, you'll be treated like this.
That dumb blonde stereotype came from the 70s, promoted by 70s feminists as the Antichrist or the worst thing in the world. But, see, that's what we have. We've gotten this repeated message that a curvaceous woman is terrible. She's an idiot. She's a victim. She sets women back. That is the constant message we've been getting for decades now. But in the in chapter 1 of my book, I show that wasn't always the case, and that's not even really true. And I go through various archetypes throughout the 80s, for instance, that fit the Boobs of Steel archetype or trope. And let me pull up the file just to give a few examples. I talk about how Adrienne Barbeau, basically, her career-defining role was in playing Maggie in Escape from New York. Beautiful, tough woman. And, you know, that exposed cleavage was part of her power and her strength over even Snake.
And
you know,
her appearance in Swamp Thing was just even better.
But, you know, we also saw that in the Pam Grier films. You know, Pam Grier is essentially the first modern film action heroine. And in all those 70s films, her curves were always kind of presented as she's hyper feminine. She's the superior woman. And there are scenes in those old film or in those 70s films where her being the more curvaceous woman was a sign of her being more female, the most female in the room, or the most woman in the room. You know, we see that, you know, again, Xena, Lucy Lawless doesn't have much of a bust, but there's a reason Lucy Lawless was padded out with 2 Wonder Bras to make sure that she had at least a D cup as Xena, because she had to represent that archetype of hyper feminine, but also a warrior. And I can go on and on. There are so many. I mean, anime we don't even have to get into anime.
No. Anime takes a good thing and just makes it all that much better.
Well, no, in the 80s and 90s, I mean, there were all sorts of great characters. I mean, there was Motoko Kusanagi was one of them. In Ghost in the Shell, there was Danan from Appleseed. Those are the 2 off the top of my head, but there was a whole line of characters that were essentially the tough girl future cop. And that was an archetype. Lara Croft is another. Lara Croft is not a dumb blonde. She is not a dumb bimbo.
Exactly.
She is the ultimate bad girl, and she dominated pop culture in the 90s. And that chest was part of it, was her outward expression of her feminine strength. And yeah, I don't know, you would be hard pressed to say anyone who could convince you that the 90s era Lara Croft was a wimp. I mean, we got her now crying and, you know, running away from rapists, but originally the real Lara Croft would kick their asses.
Yeah. You wouldn't even need a gun or a whip.
Yeah. But Power Girl's another one. Power Girl was always the flip side to Supergirl. Supergirl was somewhat originally, she was kind of virginal. She was a teenager. She was the good girl. Power Girl was the woman.
Right.
And she was the most woman, you know.
Yeah. And of course, you know, you probably know the story as well as anybody else of how Jerry Conway and Wally Wood, in creating her, just ran the joke of, hey, every issue, make her boobs a little bit bigger until somebody notices.
Guess what? I don't know if this ruins it for you. In book 2,
yeah,
I think it's book 2, I do an entire chapter on Power Girl. I found out that isn't true.
Really?
That story isn't true. It was an excuse made up later by Conway.
Okay. So
and
I didn't get bigger at all, or
you go back in the comics, it's no, she was always that busty.
You know, I remember her first appearance, and yeah, that boob window was well, it came out around the same time as all the Dave Cockrum designs for Legion of Superheroes, and he was cutting windows everywhere.
Well, there was always the argument, oh, why doesn't she have an S on her chest? Oh, she should have a symbol. And it's like, I would argue that circle with the cleavage is her symbol.
Yeah.
She's a woman with nothing to hide or to be embarrassed about. She is fearless. And, you know, the original Power Girl was not trashy. This whole idea that she was falling out, that didn't really come about until, I think, the 90s, when you had certain artists who weren't taking the character seriously.
Right. And some Adam Hughes covers.
Yeah, Adam Hughes. Then later, as time went on and more complaints were made about her, the more slutty and trashy they made her. I mean, was it Amanda Connors now was drawing her, and she was virtually falling out of her top. Well, a woman's drawing her. Wait a minute.
Yeah, it was almost like they were at that point thumbing their nose at the critics.
I wouldn't agree with that, actually. In the Power Girl chapter, I read up on it. I read up on the interviews, and I was disappointed with Palmiotti. In book 2, he's not going to come out of this looking very good.
Okay.
A lot of the stuff he said was pretty negative. He was making excuses for Power Girl's bust size, saying, well, it's not my fault. So-and-so did it. It's not me. They made an issue out of it. And I would even argue that when Gray and Palmiotti and Connor took over Power Girl, the character degenerated. She stopped being this wonderful, kick-ass character that Jeff Johns had been writing all this time in JSA. And they had turned her into what's just an ongoing boob joke. That's all she was. It was constant boob jokes. And the first issue, she went from being this interesting character to stuck up, cold. She was saying all the typical lines that you were, oh, well, eyes up here, that kind of crap.
Yeah.
And as time went on, they team her with Harley and she becomes Harley's sidekick. I mean, they were debasing the bustiest character in the DCU. And you realize this character, Power Girl, and Lara Croft as well, there's been ongoing campaigns against their cup size since the 90s. That's like at least 25 years of social justice warriors and culture crusaders saying that one character with that body type is unacceptable. All the rest are okay, but that body type needs to go. It's like, wait a minute, that's my wife's body type. You telling me that she doesn't get to have superheroes? I thought we believed in representation.
Yeah, come on. Everybody, there's some flat-chested superheroines out there. Ice comes to mind.
Well, a whole bunch of them are flat-chested now.
Well, yeah.
In fact, most of our superheroes seem to have been replaced by millennial teenagers or tweens with a whole host of just weird personal issues and hang-ups.
Who drink coffee and talk all the time. It's a crazy time in comics, and it's never seen. Well, it's an industry that's embarrassed of itself because it's now being written by people who don't really love comics, but they found a job to get a resume built up so they can move on.
No, they wormed their way. They colonized comics. They took AIM and worked their way in.
Yeah,
and with an agenda.
But not to make comics better or to make good comics. They did it to do what they wanted to do, and they were.
I mean, well, once they were done ruining video games, it was time to destroy comics, and they did it. Yeah,
one of the truly American born art forms.
Absolutely.
So one of the things I was reading about in the first chapter there, you touched on some Wonder Woman recent history. Now, I remember when she was made an honorary ambassador to the UN. I totally missed the headlines where they kicked her out.
Oh, yeah. Apparently it was this huge thing. There were protests. And it was kind of, remember how Greg Rucka was like insisting that Wonder Woman be flat-chested and muscled, like really ripped, and have kind of a square jaw? Do you remember that?
I remember that. In fact, I remember the and you allude to this here when Frank Cho was kicked off his contract was voided at Rucka's insistence, and I saw the original image that fired this off, and it was one line of artwork. It was basically Wonder Woman was bent over, and it was still black and white artwork at this time. There was a line on her buttocks to indicate the leg band of her shorts. And that was just too sexy for Greg Rucka. He wanted that line gone. So I guess Greg Rucka's interpretation of Wonder Woman is that she doesn't wear panties under her skirt.
And the ridiculous thing is if you look into the creation of Wonder Woman, her measurements were actually an integral part of who she was, so much that Marston was very clear on that she had to have what he called the ideal modern Venus measurements. And, for all of his weird hangups, he understood archetypes. He understood how the image on the page would affect the subconscious. And he designed
he was a psychologist anyway.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And then the thing is again, he had a lot of weird ideas, but you start getting into he understood human psychology very, very well. Yeah. And there are like lessons in there that you would never see today. Like there was one where Marston wrote where a girl they won't let her play baseball with the boys because she isn't strong enough. And rather than saying, well, the boys should let you play, she takes the girl to Paradise Island and teaches her how to, strengthen up, become more athletic. And then they discover, oh my God, she's an Amazon and she can become one of us. And so she starts getting super strength and all that, but she goes back. And now that she's capable of playing the game, the boys are more than happy to welcome her. It's like, okay, fine, that's fine. There's a follow-up issue where now she's using her strength to get her way and bully people and be a brute. And Wonder Woman says, okay, well, we're gonna have to take you back to Paradise Island and teach you humility and kindness.
Didn't learn all the lessons you needed to get.
And you'd never see that now. You would never. But getting back to the UN. Yeah, Wonder Woman was going to be a honorary ambassador for their women's program. It was all these various programs to encourage women to do stuff. And feminists and Islamic nations joined up. Islamic delegates and feminist delegates joined up to protest this and basically forced it so that Wonder Woman was rescinded that honorary status.
Angry about a fictional character.
Yeah. And, the thing is a similar thing happened with Uzaki-chan when the Red Cross used her for a blood drive. No one cared in Japan, but apparently here feminism couldn't handle the fact that a short stack, cutesy anime girl with big tits was being used as a mascot. But they were fine with Angry Birds supporting the environment and being made honorary ambassadors.
Yeah, well, they hate boobs for some reason, and I don't think it's just purely aesthetic. I think
no,
they represent.
It's an outward. Yeah, it is exactly what it represents. It's the most visible show that someone's female. It is the most visible automatic sign of someone's a woman, and for thousands of years, full breasts have been interpreted as beauty, fertility, femininity. They're a symbol of life and life-giving, nurturing, and apparently the modern woman shouldn't have any of those qualities. And the weird thing is,
even mentioned in the Bible,
it is an attack on being a woman. Womanhood itself is under assault. When you read in the later chapters, you'll start to see that they basically were starting from a postmodernist point of view and this came from Beauvoir in the late 40s. The statement Beauvoir put forward, women aren't born, they are created. Womanhood itself is a concept created by patriarchy to enslave women. And that if you just removed the woman aspect from a woman, all barriers would be lifted. And the feminists in the 70s took that to heart, and they have been spending the last few decades essentially trying to erase the idea that women are different than men.
Yes.
And anything that's outwardly feminine, they wanted destroyed.
And the government basically found a way to, double the tax base and indoctrinate the children.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they didn't want them to be mothers anymore. It's like, whatever happened to choice?
Yeah, it was, you still had it. You just needed to make the right one.
Yeah.
You don't want to end up on the wrong side of history with your choice. Your wife is talking about your experience with Catwoman, and I, of course, agree with Gordon Goodbrother here. The Jim Balance stuff. They might have targeted that, but he got a good long run out of those.
Oh yeah. Truth be told, Catwoman's supposed to have a dancer's body, but I didn't mind Balance Run.
Nobody did. It
um,
was his style.
No, actually, with Catwoman, I think she was pointing out that was yet another one of these Boobs of Steel characters. And typically she fit into the archetype of bad girl, along with Laura Croft. Kind of these loose cannons that did what they wanted and lived on the edge and were thrill seekers.
Right.
But I whittled it down to a handful of archetypes that can fit the Boobs of Steel trope, or often are associated with.
I know a lot of the focus. I know a lot of the focus goes with Wonder Woman in the comics for that. Because,
The first book is mostly about Amazons and Wonder Woman, for the sheer fact that the Amazon dates back to Paleolithic man. I mean, thousands and thousands of years ago, that image of the wild woman and the huntress became the Amazon of Greece. And so all of our female heroines began with that, basically action heroines. All female action heroines sprung from the Amazon. So, of course, I had to cover the history. And as time went on, I kind of pointed out that how we started defining our experience with Catwoman. Good point, Kat. I'll bring that up in a minute. We compare most of our heroines or judge them by Wonder Woman. And what happened is, as the Amazon became more and more of a figure in culture, other archetypes started to split off from that and were defined by how they were different from the Amazon. So that's where you get, your bad girl, your tomboy, your femme fatale. All those were offshoots of the Amazon. Valkyries.
When I look back at the golden age of comics, it's never really Wonder Woman that I look at as like, oh yeah, she was the one who was, powerfully drawn with big breasts. I look at Phantom Lady for that.
Oh, that's because Phantom Lady was outwardly okay. That's another one people get wrong. You keep hearing, oh, they're so sexualized. Teela was sexualized in the old He-Man cartoon. No, she wasn't. Sheila had a grown woman's body, and she was out doing things that weren't sexual. At no point did the camera linger on her ass or her cleavage. At no point was she posing in sexy poses. No, she had a grown woman's body. Did it have secondary sex characteristics? Yes, but it was not sexualized. But so Wonder Woman, right? Like you said, you didn't look at Wonder. That's because she was never portrayed as such for the most part. She was a different kind of figure. She was a grown woman, but being the temptress or using her beauty to get people to do stuff wasn't an aspect of femininity she covered. She represented something else.
I just want to throw this one thing up here as a counterpoint. Never mind, it won't let me add the screen. Let me stop it and I'll share it again. I love it when things work the way they're supposed to. This isn't one of those things.
Phantom Lady was actually based on Ella Raines, who was in a film called The Phantom Lady. And it was a great noir film. But as he's getting the counterpoint, let's hold on.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not wanting to share. It shows up as a...
Okay.
So there we go. There we go. That's an actual screen grab.
Yeah.
So
but how
sometimes the animators did stuff.
Here's the animators, it does look like she's groping her, but was that arm moving, and how far away from that breast is it really? There's no shadows.
No, there's not. You can't tell.
So it's very easy to do that in a screen grab. I mean, honestly, those old cell animations are very easy to do. Was there stuff slipped into He-Man? Oh, absolutely. Tons of stuff slipped into He-Man.
I've got a few of them that I grabbed from the DVD set. I'm like, wait a second, did I just see that thing? And I only bring it up because you mentioned Teela and the controversy surrounding her. I'm like, oh, I have something to show.
So Kat wanted me to bring up our experience. Kat and I did a Catwoman story. We illustrated it. We didn't write it. In, oh God, was it 2009, Cat? I forget what. But it was in Batman, giant size Batman 80. And it was the Christmas special. And we illustrated a Catwoman story for a woman named Ivory Madison, I believe. And it was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. The editor, Mike Kennedy, was a great guy, wonderful to work with. He was very understanding, and he knew it was our first job with a big company. He was totally cool about it, walked us through it. But we would start getting these weird calls from the writer in the middle of the night saying, no, you got to make her look more like a bodybuilder. Her boobs are too big in the scene. And I'm saying, I'm staying on model. No. We're going to do this, and we're not going to tell Mike. It's like, no. And she was constantly trying to get me to portray Catwoman as flat-chested, muscled, and ugly. And at one point she says, no, you got to make her shorter. She's not, no, I want the villain to be taller than her. It's like, well, I have to stay on model.
Yeah. You have model sheets for these characters. This is what they look like. You want a taller villain, get Blockbuster.
Now, here's the thing. This was right when comics started getting stupid political. And to show their diversity, Ivory Madison's prior job, it wasn't writing, she hadn't written anything. She was the head manager of the San Francisco branch of the National Organization of Women.
Oh. The National Association of Gals, as I like to say, right. Or NAG.
But, you know, we've talked mainly about the political stuff. I mean, how much of the book have you gotten through?
Not all of it.
Okay.
First chapter and a half.
Oh, okay.
And that's because I've been packing up books every night this week, and I've realized, show tonight, read something.
Yeah, I think what people will be surprised about is, there's going to be a later book, because I've gotten 3 of them written, so they're going to be popping up, hopefully in rapid succession. But in this first one, you get a lot of history. I mean, I talk a lot about pop culture history and a subject that people usually won't bring up. And, you know, if you want to get a full backstory on the 80s and action heroines, this book will give it to you. Same thing with Japan in the 70s and 80s. It's right in there. And in doing so, the reason I told these is, one, people need to know the history to understand what we're losing and what we've lost right now, and why female characters suck now, and why why we had all these great characters in the past. But in doing it, I also kind of am subtly giving a lesson in Jungian archetypes to the audience without them noticing.
Yeah, and folks, definitely get this book. By the way, the link is below the video for those who are not seeing the chat in replay. Take you straight to Amazon. You can get it for your Kindle. It's 179 pages, so this is not a light read. This is definitely a deep dive into what facetiously might look facetious on the surface.
Well, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's definitely humor in it. I tried my best not to have this read academically. I wanted it to be a little bit more of a engaging style that read more like a magazine article. And there's definitely humor in it. There's some snark as well.
And it does. It reads very quickly. From what I was able to read with the time I had, you just breeze right through it. And then, of course, I did fly through the rest of the chapters just to see the layout and the design. It's sourced throughout here, folks. So
yeah. Well, the print edition is going to be really nice. It's going to be a lot of visual references to kind of illustrate my point. But yeah, like for instance, if you wanted to have an understanding of anime and how certain archetypes and tropes and characters came about, you're going to get it in this book. Bring me all the snark. But okay, so what other impressions did you get from that introduction? Because I mean, the introduction is kind of personal in some parts.
It's hard to say. I mean, you know, I was reading through pieces and saying, "Yep, I remember when this happened. Yeah, I remember when that happened." You know, you've definitely touched on She-Hulk. That's what it was, She-Hulk, and her transformation.
Yeah.
because everyone was like, wait a second, what happened to this John Byrne sexy, I sunbathed topless on the roof of the Baxter building because I like to this ugly grunting Hulk-like character. And then of course, spoiler alert for those who didn't bother to read it and think they might still at some point, to find out that because she's a shapeshifter, she's doing it on purpose to make herself look ugly and then making herself sound stupid.
Yeah.
It was such an insult to the character that had been so smart and brainy and sexy for years before.
Well, again, I really wanted to give readers plenty of ammo to push back every time you heard oh, well, that's sexist. That has been the line that they've used to get their foot in the door, to censor the hell out of everything. I mean, that was their way of getting in, saying, well, you need more women because comics are sexist. Why? See those boobs? That was always the excuse.
Yeah.
Was, busty superheroes. Busty, yeah, that was always the excuse.
You want to know what's sexually demeaning?
What?
Look at 80 years of comics, and every year look at Superman and Batman's crotch. Flattest thing in the world.
Yeah, kind of insulting to the two of them. You'd expect better from them, but so She-Hulk. I do a lot on her because one, she's a much more recent archetype, and we can actually center it down to John Byrne's She-Hulk created all these other tropes, themes, and character types from that She-Hulk. We know where the origin started, so it's a great case study. But Byrne's She-Hulk was often dismissed now as just being sexist or just being a adolescent fantasy or just cheap TNA, and nothing could be further from the truth. I make it very clear that the original She-Hulk was actually monstrous and kind of brainless, and she was just basically a female version of the Hulk, Banner, and it bombed. It's like, well, we've already seen a man do that. Who cares? Now, the thing with the Hulk was when Banner, who was very calm and controlled, lost his temper, he turned into a monster. It was all of his contained rage came out. It symbolized his rage. That's what he was. And Byrne had the really clever idea of, well, how about with Jennifer Walters, instead of her being rage, well, she's a mousy, pent-up woman in an office job, or she's a lawyer. And she feels very constrained. So when she becomes a Hulk, what comes out is a repressed sexuality. And that just opened the door to everything.
And just to underscore your own point about how throughout history, large breasts represent female power and empowerment. She could change back and forth, but she would argue cases in court at full 7-foot height, H-cup sized breasts, because she wanted to be as powerful as possible, not to fight a supervillain in the streets, but to be seen as a powerful force in other aspects of her life.
Absolutely. And Byrne was such a great writer that, I mean, it's just that is well worth going back to if you haven't read that. It is well worth reading. But yeah, She-Hulk was an excellent example of where things just completely went off the rails, because the moment the feminists and the woke people took over comics, what'd they do? They turned her back into a monster. They made her a masculine monster. They ripped her, they robbed her of her femininity. Why? I thought you liked women. I thought you were supporting women.
Well, remember, they don't know what a woman is.
That is true. That is absolutely true. And I think that's also a part of it, is by getting rid of feminine features and getting rid of the heroines, basically portraying feminine as heroic. That's all been ditched. If a woman wants to be heroic, she has to be a man now. And clearly, this is all part of their getting rid of womanhood. They don't want women to exist. I don't know what they want.
Population control, maybe, because it's definitely impacting reproduction rates.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just clearly the thing is the feminist movement of the 70s was very different than the prior one because it was primarily centered in New York. And so it had a very specific view and a very specific opinion of the world and goals. And they all shared the same weird hang-ups.
Yeah.
And
But
so,
at the same time, that level of that brand of feminism did not eschew the actual femininity. If you remember Gloria Steinem is the reason why the Denny O'Neil white costume Wonder Woman without powers was gotten rid of so quickly, because they had just put her on the cover of Ms. Magazine, and Gloria Steinem's like, what's this? You've taken away her power. You've taken away her agency. Bring back the Stars and Bars costume and give her power back.
for all of Steinem's flaws, I will give her credit for doing that because she was absolutely right. And the thing was, and this is in the book, I think you might probably remember, that proved so controversial, putting Wonder Woman on Ms. Magazine, that it was actually the thing that divided the feminist movement, because there was that whole rift that formed in the 70s where the, sex positive, have it all feminists split from the more militant, political lesbians and matriarchists. And, Betty Friedan, which was one of the co-founders of Ms., had a very public falling out and hatred. The two of them fought for years strictly because Steinem put Wonder Woman on the cover of Ms. Magazine. And then when Linda Carter became Wonder Woman for the show, again, there was this gigantic blow up from the, I'll be blunt, the communist half of the feminist movement, because how dare they put a Miss America winner as the feminist mascot? How dare they? A beauty queen winner. That's horrible. She's taking us back, 50 years because she's pretty.
She did a great show. In fact, I've got I look to my right here and I have an 8x10 in a frame of Linda Carter from a pose she did for Apocalypse Now, which never made the movie because she was recast because she got the Wonder Woman job. And
interesting.
Well, she had the role of Miss May in Apocalypse Now, and so they did a fake Playboy magazine with her as the centerfold. So, yes, that's really her, and those are her boobs that I'm looking at. So,
oh yeah. Actually, the funny thing is
Google,
they kept
folks.
saying unrealistic body image, right? Linda Carter's measurements are actually more extreme than the ones that Marston wanted. Linda Carter was actually more hourglass and more busty than the actual Wonder Woman of the books. So,
God bless her for it. Yeah. But you know what? Wonder Woman wasn't alone for the largest part of the Golden Age run. This kind of got lessened to a bit, but in the earlier days, it wasn't just Wonder Woman who was there. There were the Holiday Girls, among which were Etta Candy. Now, Etta Candy's body type was extreme in the other direction, and yet she was a capable assistant and heroine in her own right.
Yeah, apparently she was based on a real person, Marston knew. But yeah, Etta Candy was pretty plump and had a bit of an eating disorder, but it didn't matter. I think another thing that I would like to bring up with comics and, actually just culture in general, our movies, our video games, our books, by removing the feminine element, the other thing that we've really lost is a sense of playful sexuality, playful flirting, grown women behaving like grown women and it not meaning anything else other than playful, right?
Yeah.
Now
that's
it's
because men are
hookup
scared.
culture. Yeah. It's always now just straight hookup culture. Everything's gone straight into the gutter. You can't have any mild show of affection or it's bizarre.
Yeah, it's I mean, if you want an example of that, folks, go binge a couple of seasons of Moonlighting with Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis.
Yeah, but
that was a great example of.
And I think another thing
sexuality
is a lot of people forget how much of a soap opera Claremont's X-Men was.
Oh yeah, It really was. Well, all comics were at that time because you had your single issue stories. Sometimes it was 2 issues if it was like a really big thing, but you always had these long running subplots that kind of moved slowly along, but were not the main story. You know, they were building to something that would be a main story.
Yeah.
And we don't have people who know how to write that thing anymore.
No. So
comics are now being written by people who don't love comics.
Right.
In fact, a lot of comics are being written by people who actively hate comics.
Yeah, same with movies. I mean, you look at Star Wars. Kennedy hates Star Wars. It's obvious. And she apparently doesn't like Indiana Jones either. And the people in gaming, Anita Sarkeesian got brought in to advise on the making of various games. They all bombed. But why would you bring someone who hates video games in to advise you on how to make video games? It makes absolutely no sense.
Well, for the same reason that a network that plays country music videos takes the advice of people who hate country music. Regarding what videos they will or will not play.
And the other real big disaster with comics is that right now the big 2 are far more concerned with impressing the New Yorker than pleasing people who actually pay for their comics.
Yeah.
And that's actually true. They care more about what the New Yorker and the New York Times say about them.
And it's a weird focus. I mean, it's not, and this defeminization is a huge part of what they're doing, but they're actively anti-fan. And Marvel, is a clear example of this, where they go out of their way to do what they know will antagonize their core readership.
Right, and it's just baffling. So, if you don't mind, I don't know how much longer we're going to go on, but I wanted to talk a little about where all of this is heading and why, really, to give you the final reason why I wrote this book, other than I love my wife and I was sick of seeing all the characters she loved be turned into the butt of jokes or flat-chested bitches. I don't know if I could say that.
Sure.
But no, it was just time after time. Wait a minute, why is it all these characters my wife loves or relates to, they're the ones that have to be destroyed? That was kind of one of the things that started it. And just the absolute hatred of femininity and breasts. I mean, it got to the point where I purposely put busty characters in my books for the explicit reason everybody wanted to get rid of them. But, the other reason I wrote this book was I argue over and over again that classic archetypes play a vital role in who we are as people and as a culture. They're vital storytelling devices. And the idea of the concepts nourish and sustain a culture's identity. These stories we tell nurture a culture and who we are. They're the stories we tell about ourselves and what we see as heroic. So in that regard, I look back to my own youth, and as a kid, I was in a broken home. My family was not a good one. It was a very bad environment. And I would say my father was not a great male role model. But yet, as a kid, I grew up with Luke Skywalker, Captain Kirk, Thomas Magnum, Roy Fokker, Batman. And, these were all very different men, but they all shared a moral code. They had honor, duty, self-sacrifice. They all valued the sanctity of life. And these men made hard choices. And they never took death lightly. All these characters, they also they believed in redemption. But these characters, for, a neglected kid, seeing them every day and being able to escape into them for a few hours on TV gave me a healthy vision, or a much healthier view of masculinity than the one I was getting at home. And that really stayed with me. And right now, male characters are just being thrown out. They're just gone. And that in itself is a big problem. But what I find even more worrisome is the so-called heroines that are being marketed to little girls. I mean, you go on Disney Plus today, you can go, hey kids, you want to watch the movie about the puppy killer? It's on Disney Plus, and it's called Cruella. Why is it that now the heroines being marketed to our girls are just monsters?
We have to have sympathy for the villain.
Right. No, we don't.
No, we don't.
We can offer redemption to the villain. I like that.
Yeah, but they don't want to have this is bad, this is good. That's a binary decision, and we all know that binary is bad.
Well, beyond that, morals in general. They do not want moral choices. Everything's subjective. That's horrible. You look at all the old comics, Star Trek, go down the list, they're all morality tales.
Yeah.
That was the thing that really kept, that's the axis they all revolve around.
And they did it without being preachy.
Oh, yeah. Well, you don't preach. When you tell a story, you're showing someone going through the journey. You're showing them being forced to make hard choices and make moral decisions and learn from their mistakes. The fact is, Gollum was given every chance in Lord of the Rings to redeem himself. That's important.
Yeah.
It really, I would even go further than saying that it's not just anti-woman, it's anti-human.
Well, ultimately it will be, yeah.
Yeah. They want to remove us. They want to remove us from what makes us people, what makes families, what makes life worth living. They don't want mothers to raise kids anymore. They don't want fathers in the house anymore. They don't want families to be together. They don't want men to be friends. If men are friends, they have to be having sex. They don't want marriage. They want hookup culture. This is sick.
Yeah.
And this is the stuff they're putting in their comics. In book 2, which again, I hope to have out soon, I get into a full breakdown of how the original She-Ra was created and why it succeeded versus the new She-Ra. And the stuff I found out about the new She-Ra is a little stomach turning. I mean, it really was created as propaganda to get kids to question their sex and to teach them. It was grooming material. It really was. It was by design.
I need to read that one. So get to writing. Finish that one up.
It's close. It is very close to being done.
So is this going to be a 2-book treatise, a 3-book treatise?
Well, I broke down and published the first one. I mean, it originally was 1 book, but I've been working for 2.5 years on it. And everyone kept saying, well, when are you going to put this out? When are you going to put this out? And it's like, you know what? I'll publish the first 25%. And I'm like, oh my God, it's almost 200 pages. That means the whole book would be around 800 pages. So I decided, okay, it's got to be a series. Now, hopefully, maybe a year or 2 from now, I'll have them all collected into 2 books. But yeah, that's why it is going to be a series, because there was just too much ground to cover. The first one is primarily history, demoralizing humanity
and demonizing humanity. Just humans are bad. Let's stop making them. That's
there's absolutely no message about humanity, listening to its better angels, becoming better, doing better, being put in the worst of situations and making the right choice. Or it's just, again, they want us to aim low and be absolute degenerate. Yeah, degenerates.
Well, yeah, because it's you always see whenever you got a politician who's like, high on family values, and this is what I believe and this is what I stand for, and then they have a downfall. Well, that's what gets celebrated and really played up in the culture. It's like, oh, well, look, this guy says he was family values, and and he did this, so apparently he's not. The ultimate message is like, if I don't say I'm family values, then I don't have to be, and I'm okay because I never said I was. And if we can get everybody to be that way, then then there are no values. It's sort of the opposite of what Syndrome said. When everybody's super, no one is. When nobody's moral, everyone is.
Exactly. And I think we're seeing it happen right now. You know, what's the big hit at the movies? An indie film about a guy who's saving children.
Yeah.
Where what was it competing against? A $300 million, was a $500 million movie about a feminist crapping on one of our icons. It's not a hard choice.
Yeah, they didn't like that, and you know that's why you don't hear anything about the movie other than you know how much of a QAnon conspiracy film it is, even though it's based on a true story and a real life person who's still out there doing what is being portrayed.
Well, even if it was fake, which it isn't, I saw it. I've seen the footage from the actual busts as well. It really happened. The thing about Sound of Freedom is it's a good story. It's a strong narrative. You've got very well-written characters. You have a character who has a redemption arc. You have a man who sacrifices basically comfort to do what's right. You have people making very hard moral decisions, and you have people who are blatantly evil. And we're shown it's very clear what is right and what is wrong. I mean, that is kind of the core of any heroic story. What is right and what's wrong? You have to make the choice. But
and that was, you know, one of the lessons that I wrote an article decades ago now. God, I'm old. About, you know, all the moral lessons I learned from being a comic book reader all my life. And I'm talking from 5 years old. And one of them was best exemplified in Mark Waid's writing, of all people, when he wrote Superman in Kingdom Come. And the statement was, there is a right and there is a wrong, and the difference is not difficult to distinguish.
Yeah.
And now it's like, but is it?
Deconstructing heroes is really just gotten really old. I mean, how many more times do we have to see a story about, hey, yeah, you know, all the superheroes that are out doing good, they're really terrible assholes. They're horrible, horrible people. That's interesting. How? Yeah. That has been, look, that was old in the 80s after it was done. And really, when you deconstruct something, that's with the notion that you're going to put it back together, not just break it.
Yeah, because there's a difference between a hero with a flaw and a hero who's an asshole. Tony Stark's alcoholism was a developed flaw. And you know, because you can redeem a flaw, or you can overcome it. But you know, if you're just a jerk, you're Homelander. Then
well, at no point are you going to see Homelander suddenly say, "Well, wait a minute. Maybe what I'm doing is." He's never going to have the Magneto moment of "What have I become?" No. Which has been retconned out of existence, but.
Of course, because that's what they do. Wait, we didn't like that. That made our character likable. And you saw it with. We didn't bring this up either, but this might not be part of what your series is going to be about, I guess, because it's working on the opposite side of the gender spectrum here, where you've got the while you have the masculinization of women, you're having the feminization of men. Batman was a good example under Tom King's run. He was like, you know, totally submissive to Selena all that time. You know, talking about, I had a dream about my mommy the other night, and like, what kind of Batman is this? This is not, you know, the heroic, inspirational, overcoming trauma kind of character that we were used to.
Fortunately, that's not going as well. I think that no matter how badly feminists and woke culture warriors want it, no matter what they do, no level of social conditioning is going to break millions of years of horny teenage boy evolution.
No, and if you start taking the boobs off our heroines, we'll do what we're doing, which is we'll make our own.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So,
and that's the greatest thing that can happen to indie comics is the former big two continuing down the path they're on.
Yeah, I think basically Disney, Marvel, DC, Hollywood in general also just needs to fall. They have lost their way. Their own debauchery and just greed has completely destroyed any value that they once had. And yeah, it's time for them to fall and be replaced by people
And
who
we're
actually
watching it. It's a
care.
slow motion collapse. And it can't happen soon enough. So that
Yeah, I
something
agree.
better can
I
come in and
thoroughly
replace it.
agree.
Well, we've gone a little over the top of the hour, but that's fine. We're not constricted by any time limits here on YouTube. But is there any part of the book that we haven't touched on that? I mean, this is the selling portion here. What would be something in there that you think readers would hook onto right now? Hit that link below the video and get their wallets out and pick up this Kindle.
Okay, I will give all the reasons. The number one reason is if we're going to restore what we've lost, a lot of you Zoomers and millennials out there have to know what it is that's been taken from you. This book will tell you exactly what's been taken from you. It'll give you a nice history of great heroines, of great movies, of great comics. It will tell you exactly what these archetypes are, and it gets into how to write them. It gets into how to actually tell these stories as well. I give examples of where I'll write a scene and say, okay, well, I wrote a masculine woman in the scene. Now watch what happens when the only thing I change is the way she looks. Now the scene reads totally different. I get into that. If you want to understand Jungian archetypes, it is a very easy lesson in this book because I pad it out with, well, films you've all probably seen. I get into why modern characters are failing. I talk about America Chavez in depth. I do a whole chapter on her. I get into the history of Wonder Woman, or at least the side we never hear about. I mean, the biggest problem with that was that with Wonder Woman, she's so overshadowed now with Marston's kink that we don't really get an objective look at who the character is. Also tells you a lot of dirty secrets about feminists' history and just how deeply communism's been embedded in our entertainment industry and been working towards destroying it. I mean, it's amazing how long they've been around and how long they've been trying to screw up comics and movies. It's all in there.
Yeah. Well, it's what the public is consuming, and it's like poisoning the reservoir. Everyone's got to drink the water. If you have poison in the water, they're going to drink the poison. Well, everyone's consuming ideas through cinema and books. So if you poison the ideas, they'll take that in. And
so, yeah, this first book is, you get some politics, you get some history, but yeah, it's mostly, I don't know, I've already explained it. I don't think I can go any further other than at the end of the day, once you're done reading these, you will have an answer when anyone tells you, oh, well, Laura Croft's old design was sexist. Power Girl was sexist. And I'll give you every reason why they're not. I think that caught us off guard when all these women started coming into the comic scene. And the first thing did was start screaming and yelling about the way the women looked. Now, I think most of us knew they were wrong. We just didn't know why they were wrong. This book,
and we were afraid to tell them they were wrong.
Yeah, we're going to need to start gatekeeping.
We do. I mean, this goes back to, and I'm going to throw out some lore here, but this goes back to the infamous milkshake picture.
Yeah.
And the point of that, and a lot of people have got this lost now. The point is not, hey, look at all these women in comics, blah, 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 isn't this terrible? The point was, hey, how come all the middle-aged white male editors all have young, attractive, fresh out of school female junior editors? And does it have anything to do with the fact that the comics are eroding in quality and timeliness? Because maybe they're not doing their job, they're doing something else. And that was taken personally by Heather Antos and other people in the photo, and much defense and white knighting was done when the attack was not against the people in the photo, it was actually against their bosses for having their focus somewhere else, and that got lost.
Well, the other thing that's kind of depressing is all this affirmative actioning of women into industries rather than them earning it. Is we've all gotten the worst women in these positions. And after years of feminism saying we want all the same opportunities men have, and them being let in, not even having to work for it, it's given, it's gotten to the point now where my wife and I, if a woman's writing something, I was like, it probably sucks. Let's skip that. And that is really bad. I mean, there were a lot of great women who worked in these industries that most people have never heard of. And
for decades, we've had great women creators in comics.
Comics,
Louise Simonson, Ann Nesenti, Karen Berger, of all, running at one time, DC Comics was Jeanette Kahn running the mainstream and Karen Berger running Vertigo, and they were dominating the industry.
well, like the lie that they always claim that sci-fi was a boys' club in the 40s and 50s, right?
Yeah.
Two of the biggest writers were women, and they had no problem getting their foot in the door. They wrote good stories. They were let right in. Leigh Brackett and C.L. Moore. Why don't we don't hear about them ever? Why? I mean, Leigh Brackett wrote Empire Strikes Back. Why don't we ever hear about her? Because she was not a Democrat. She didn't play that game.
Andre Norton springs to mind for me, and DC Fontana.
DC Fontana is a legend.
Yeah. So, Madeleine L'Engle, and the horrific thing they did to her book,
but anyway, I mean, this whole thing is no, women have always been in these industries and they earned their way in and they were good. And the moment they started letting all these basically fresh out of college millennial feminists through the door, look what happened. Yeah. It went to complete garbage. No, it's because they didn't earn it. They had no business writing these books, editing these books, having any say in these books. And then, remember that whole campaign? Oh, take back comics, take back Comic-Con. You remember that?
Yes, I do.
Take back video games. Excuse me, straight white male nerds built Comic-Con, made video games. These cultures were never yours. We made these communities because we weren't welcome anywhere else. And we were kind enough to let you through the door. And what do? We owe these people nothing.
Nope. Don't let in the imitation fan.
Right. Fake geek girls are a thing.
Yeah, very much. Because
so for those of you who aren't interested in Boobs of Steel, I also write graphic novels. And I would recommend Case File Arkham 1 and 2. It's Lovecraftian noir, and it's a book where men are men, women are gorgeous, and hell monsters from the abyss do not come with a trigger warning. And it is well worth your time. You can find that by my, I write under comics by Josh Finney.
All right. And with that, Ishi, we're going to close the stream out here. Folks, the name of the book is Boobs of Steel. Usty Heroines.
And the Culture War.
Screen has gone off the top of my thing here.
Usty Heroines and the Culture War.
There we go. Yeah. Now I had a second row of things under my screen, and it pushed my screen off the top of my monitor. I'm like, I can't read it now. So, yeah, required reading if you want to get into any kind of a serious debate with somebody who's talking about taking back comics and comics are booming. Oh, you're busting comics.
Or if you want to write these kinds of characters, this is an ideal book for you.
Yes, because we're not going to get back what we've lost. We've got to make new stuff. That uses those foundations of what we had. So quit waiting, start creating, and give us something that replaces what we lost. Ishi, thank you so much for coming on tonight, man.
Hey,
I really
thanks for having me on. This was great.
I've enjoyed this conversation more than I could say. And I know we started out kind of hey, it's a boobs thing, but no, this is
It's both.
It's a fun book, but it's a serious book. So everyone click the link, go out there, get Kindles are cheap. This isn't like crowdfunding a book where you got to throw out $50 and shipping and everything. This is just it's on Amazon already. You don't have to wait. You can start reading this tonight. Yeah, you can start reading this right after the show on your Kindle device. So get out there and do it. Folks in the chat, thank you so much for being here. We do appreciate you. We don't have a show without you. We're just a podcast falling in the woods otherwise. And of course, as always, while you were here, we just hope you had a blast. Good night.